That's the standard.
Well, here's some more good news coming from Israel and Palestine. The elusive peace deal, peace in the Middle East, it could happen. Reporting today in the Daily Beast, Betsy Woodruff and Oswin have said that our old friend Ellen Dershowitz is on the case now. Writing here, Alan Dershowitz, the celebrity lawyer famous in the Trump era for criticizing the president's legal antagonists on Fox News, has consulted with senior White House officials on efforts to negotiate a peace deal between the Israelis and Palestinians. I've consulted with them about it, Dershowitz told the Daily Beast on Tuesday. He said he had discussed the issue with Jared Kushner, Special Envoy Jason Greenblatt, Ambassador David Friedman, and President Trump himself. So the Jared squad is adding another member, and if you've got the Dersh on the case, that's a deal. That's a deal right there.
He got Netanyahu. He got Netanyahu and Abbas to sit down and hash it all out over a nice big cheese pizza.
I mean, my original reaction to this, I was like, oh, they're sending Dershowitz to Israel? What did Netanyahu kill his wife or something? And here he says right here in the Daily, he says, this is Dershowitz speaking of the Golan Heights. He said, I compared the Golan Heights to a captured battleship. He said, you don't give back a battleship you've captured in a defensive war. So, you don't change horses in midstream. You don't give back battleships in defensive wars.
Yes, definitely. Like 18th century maritime law should be the standard that we use here, as opposed to international law since World War II. It just makes sense.
But yeah, no, we are sending our best over there. Jared Kushner and Alan Dershowitz.
Jesus, that's a grim concept. I mean, Kushner's peace plan, which he says he's going to unveil after the election, the Palestinian Authority has already said it's dead on arrival, and the administration has done so many things to just kind of deliberately antagonize the Palestinians, believing, I think, that if you just bash these people down enough, they'll accept whatever slop you offer them. And so, we've had the recognition of Jerusalem and the embassy move. You've got the Golan now, which doesn't really affect the Palestinians, but is still part and parcel of the sort of Israel gets whatever it wants idea. They've cut aid to the UN Relief Works Agency, which handles Palestinian refugee issues, basically trying to eliminate that agency and just define Palestinian refugees out of existence. And I think much like the strategy that they've used with a number of other kind of sort of opponents of the United States around the world, I think they're going to find that you can't, like, the beatings will continue until morale improves. It's not really a standard for international negotiations. It doesn't get people inclined to talk to you and really listen to what you're trying to say.
So we won't get to see the Kushner plan until after the Israeli elections, but when we do get to see it, I'm willing to bet a huge feature of it will getting both sides, both Abbas and Netanyahu, to agree to buy 666 Park Avenue.
I'm sure it's going to be, on the table somewhere.
Yeah, if we can get them together on one shitty building that's been losing money ever since he bought it, that's the first step. Imagine if, what if they have to live and work together in 666 Park Avenue?
They have to fix the toilets together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Interview doormen.
And then lose money.
And then just continually
continue to hemorrhage money on their idiotic real estate speculation.
That's truly an odd couple for the 21st century. That would be a good sitcom, I think.
Moving on from Israel, here's another global hotspot. How about Venezuela? Venezuela continues to vex U.S. policymakers. But Derek, I'm gonna just state this, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or not. This is just my impression of what's going on in Venezuela right now, or at least from the American blob perspective. I think it's actually kind of heartening to see just how badly this coup attempt has turned out so far, because, it has not been impressive. If you were hoping for regime change, if you were hoping to get Maduro out of there quick, it has not gone the way. Just the idea that, Guaido or whatever just came to America, and then Marco Rubio and Mike Pence were like, great, yeah, we got it. All those generals, they support you, and then like just nothing happens. Like you can't be feeling too great about that if you want to see Maduro out of there.
It's like the Bay of Pigs if everyone involved had a massive head injury.
I mean, it's certainly a far cry from the case that the Bush administration made for intervening in Iraq. The plan here seems to have been to have Guaido just kind of announce, which he did in January, okay, I'm the president now, and the whole Venezuelan political system would just kind of fall in line. Like the military would turn on Maduro, everybody would just say, oh, okay, you're the president now, here we go. And yeah, none of that has happened, and he clearly doesn't have any idea what to do at this point, and neither, it seems, does the Trump administration. Like the expectation was that this would happen very quickly, and nothing changed, and now they're just kind of white knuckling it and trying to figure out another way forward. Basically.
Well, I think the way forward pretty clearly from now is that they are going. I mean, all the people who, of course, are in this country were so terrified and concerned for all the horrible misery and deprivation caused by a basically collapsed economy in Venezuela. Well, now their strategy is going to be make everything even more desperate and miserable there through increasing sanctions and the blackouts and things like that. I mean, it's very clear that what they're going to do now is basically just squeeze and starve the country until they hope the military defects.
Yes, I mean they've already done it. They cut Venezuela's oil exports. They cut off Venezuela's oil exports. That's it. I mean, that was like the nuclear option, short of actually, I guess, nuking Venezuela.
They're probably thinking about that too. I mean,
after they got owned so badly, because the root of the whole fuck up is that Guaido overpromised his ability to peel off members of the military, and they ended up getting like 50 guys or something, and then the U.S. was like, oh, shit, they had no plan B because they never had any plan to actually militarily intervene first. They didn't have anything set up with any of their allies like Brazil or Colombia to actually do the dirty work. So when they couldn't basically they wanted to foment, if not a coup, a civil war using military defectors, and they just never got it. And yeah, now their only thing they can do is just make things worse and worse for people in Venezuela, and then say, oh my God, look what Maduro's doing. Classic American style, stop hitting yourself foreign policy.
And Derek, I got here, there's an article in the Washington Post that ran this week that I think basically sums up the kind of blob thinking on this. Comes courtesy of Jackson Deal. There's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Oh,
him and Fred Hyatt are really like the Beavis and Butthead of like dipshit neoconservative American policy as far as newspapers go. But
takes.
Yeah, the headline here is Trump's intervention in Venezuela has stalled because Caracas knows he's bluffing. And he writes here, to date, however, the campaign has had virtually no effect on its intended target. There have been no significant defections of Venezuelan generals and no sign of any move against Maduro, who has remained entrenched in the presidential palace, even as opposition demonstrations have sputtered. The drive to replace Maduro with National Assembly leader Juan, how do you pronounce his name again? Juan Guaido, which has been the Trump administration's most robust foreign policy initiative after the attempt to disarm North Korea, has stalled. The problem here is not the Russians and their mostly for-show intervention. More important is the corruption of senior military leaders and the malign influence of the thousands of Cuban advisors embedded in the chain of command. That line there made me raise my eyebrow. I hadn't heard of these Cuban advisors, but they seem to have found the culprit here, and it's the Cuban advisors still bedeviling, the world's most powerful country.
Yeah, that's quite an argument, I guess. I mean, Cuba is sort of, when it comes to Latin America, there's sort of the catch-all evildoer. Like if there's a regime in Latin America that we don't like, it's because Cuba is involved. Jair Bolsonaro, when he came into office in Brazil, kicked the Cuban doctors out, basically immiserating his own people, just to kind of demonstrate that he's on the right side of history, or that he's opposed to Cuba. And yeah, that's a bit of a stretch, it seems to me. I think what they were hoping for was not so much the generals. I mean, Maduro has done a pretty good job of kind of buying the general's allegiance. He's spent into Venezuela's gold reserves, and he's used oil revenue, and he's kind of made it worth the general's while to stick with him. I think the hope was probably that you'd get a lot of like colonels and majors and captains. As you go down the chain of command, you get closer to people who are not as insulated from the hardships that Venezuelan people are facing as the generals probably are. And so the hope was maybe that you get a bunch of those guys to turn on Maduro. Maybe their loyalty to Maduro wouldn't be as strong. But yeah, I mean, it's been a total bust, and there clearly was no thought given to the idea that, what are we going to do if this doesn't work? Like if we have our guy go out there and announce that he's the president now, and everybody kind of shrugs their shoulders and says, no, not really. We're not going to pay attention to you. Like, what do we do then? There doesn't seem to have been any thought given to that.
Instead, they have to just go out there and say, well, for the 60th year in a row, we got owned by Cuba.
Yeah, exactly.
Tiny, poor island with a fraction of our GDP and foreign policy apparatus owned us again.
I mean, but I mean, aside from the top tier generals who, assuming that he's paid them off, or that it's worth it in their bank account not to defect or whatever. I mean, wouldn't he not necessarily have to Maduro is a great leader, or assume that all of Venezuela's miserition is due entirely to the United States? But what do you think accounts for the ongoing pretty staunch loyalty of the Venezuelan military?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I guess the argument. I mean, a lot of these guys may be loyal to their own generals, and their generals are loyal to Maduro, and it just kind of flows upward like that. I mean, I think the more the United States demands that Maduro go, the more likely it is that soldiers in the Venezuelan military are going to say, screw you guys. We're not interested in what the United States wants. We're not here to do America's bidding. And the more closely Guaido is identified as being kind of the Trump administration's man in Caracas, the less credibility he has to talk to these people and try to turn them to his side. It's the same problem you see in other places. I mean, you see it in Iran. There's this sort of question about how much should the United States openly be calling for regime change, and how much does that discredit the internal opposition to the Iranian government? It's in other places as well, but I think that dynamic is playing out to some degree in Venezuela. The more the United States kind of openly pushes for these things, the more resistance there is to going along with it.
And I'm sure conditions in Venezuela for the average Venezuelan probably pretty much sucks right about now. But in your mind, is there any productive role for America or the international community, in quotes, to play here in terms of aid or medicine, food, things like that? I mean, it's always complicated when the United States is involved in things like this, because it's there's a carrot and a stick always here, and the delivery, the actual delivery of the aid is also sort of questionable. But is there any? I guess what I'm saying is is there any productive role for America or any other country to in terms of just alleviating the suffering?
Lift the fucking sanctions. How about that?
Yeah, you could lift the sanctions. That would help in a more immediate sense. I think the best thing the United States could do would be to shut up. I mean, the part of the problem here, in terms of alleviating kind of the immediate suffering of the Venezuelan people, you could do that with humanitarian aid. But the whole concept of humanitarian aid in Venezuela has become so politicized now, mostly because the United States and Guaido have politicized it. I mean, Guaido did that stunt in February where he was like, I'm going to bring aid into the country, and that's going to prove that I'm the legitimate president of Venezuela. And it went completely bust. And of course it did. I mean, Maduro wouldn't let it in. And why would he? I mean, when it's presented as a direct challenge to his authority and his legitimacy, why would he have let that that aid in.
Especially when the guy from America overseeing it was Elliot Abrams, a guy who we know for a fact in the 1980s used humanitarian fucking shipments to Nicaragua to smuggle guns to the fucking Contra.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I mean by like, the United States getting involved in aid is a little complicated because I'd be really interested
because
to
they're
see,
accepting aid from not America.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course. But
right. I mean, even a lot of international NGOs didn't want any part of that humanitarian aid stunt. I keep calling it a stunt.
It was
because it was so politicized. So I think the best thing.
It was fire to their own fucking trucks.
No, Matt. I was just about to ask you. Wasn't there like an actual like false flag where like they were like, oh, the Maduro they threw a Molotov cocktail and they're blowing up the aid.
Yeah.
But it was just like a video